While throughout history there have been a lot of polarizing characters in the NFL, such as Phillip Rivers, Des Bryant, and Chad Ochocinco, none really come close to Steve Smith Sr. He was a character that wasn't afraid of letting you know that you messed up. Today, we're going to talk about the legendary career of Steve Smith Sr. Stephen Latrell Smith Sr. was born on May 12th of 1979 in the big city of Los Angeles, California. Smith would only grow to be 5 foot 9 inches tall and at his peak weigh 195 pounds. In his high school, Steve was a star, not only in the gridiron but also the track, being considered great at both sports. Although he would get into plenty of fights in school, with some teachers even saying they were shocked at his turnaround. Even though he was great, Smith didn't earn any scholarships, if any at all. He did attend college at Santa Monica University, where he would team up with, Chad Ochocinco. Funnily enough, the two of the most polarizing characters in the NFL shared the field in college, giving that small market team college a reason to sell tickets and merchandise. Here's where Smith's turnaround would happen. Coaches were telling him to not play for riches or fame, but to play for the game. They were also told not to celebrate touchdowns so that one day he could earn a higher scholarship. Smith took everything to heart and played well for 2 years, plus he didn't miss a single day of actual school either. He would then earn a scholarship to the University of Utah, and he would go to Utah and be great. All around, that is. He would finish his last 2 years at Utah recording 78 catches, 1,608 receiving yards, and 12 touchdowns, with another 1,365 return yards and 4 touchdowns on special teams. This was more than enough to grab NFL scouts' attention. On top of that, he would attend the combine, and his pre-draft measurables came in at 5 foot 9, 184 pounds, and a 4.4 40-yard dash. This would be enough to get him drafted in the third round with the 74th pick by the Carolina Panthers. Smith wouldn't take long to get settled into his now professional career, being elected to not only a Pro Bowl but also an All-Pro first team in his rookie season at the NFL level. But it's not really for the reasons you think. He really wasn't a valuable wide receiver, but he was valuable asset other places. Steve would record just 10 catches for 154 yards and no touchdowns. He would record 364 punt return yards along with a touchdown. And on top of that, he would be great in the kick return game as well, having 1,431 return yards with 2 touchdowns. This is why he was elected to an All-Pro first team. In his second season, he would improve tremendously offensively, having 54 catches for 872 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also, he would still be dangerous in the return game, having over 1,000 return yards combined. He would take another leap forward in his third year, breaking 1,000 receiving yards for the first time in his career, having 1,110 yards and 7 touchdowns on 88 catches. Once again, being good enough in the return game, having 750 total return yards. This would be the last of Smith being a returner, but this year isn't over yet. He would be a critical reason why the 2003 Carolina Panthers made it to the Super Bowl. In the playoffs alone, he would have 404 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns on just 18 catches. The Panthers would still lose the Super Bowl, however, 32-29 against the Dynasty, aka the Patriots. Moving forward in 2004, Steve would break his leg in the season opener, missing the rest of 2004. Steve did not like being injured, and he didn't take that lightly, at all. It's so much, in fact, that when he came back the following season, this is arguably one of his best seasons on paper ever. Having 103 catches for 1,563 yards and 12 touchdowns. On top of that, he would also rush for another touchdown, bringing his total up to 13. His most dominating performance of this year came in a Week 3 matchup against the Miami Dolphins, where he would single-handedly attempt to win this game, having 170 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. Despite this effort, they would still lose. He would also have an 11-catch, 201-yard, 1 touchdown performance in Week 8 against the Minnesota Vikings. In the playoffs, he would record 335 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. He'd be elected to a Pro Bowl, a first-team All-Pro, and win Comeback Player of the Year. Remember, he's only 5 foot 9. That's why this is so impressive. In 2006, Smith would record 1,166 yards and 8 touchdowns along with another rushing touchdown. While this wouldn't match his previous best, it's still a solid year either way. He would be elected to a Pro Bowl, and in 2007, he would scrape past the 1,000-yard receiving mark with 1,002 yards and 7 touchdowns. 2008 would be Smith's second best season, which he could be argued his best ever, and the reason for that is he only played in 14 games. Still recording 1,421 yards, but his touchdown numbers would drop all the way down to 6. He also was elected to a Pro Bowl, The following season, 2009, Smith had turned 30, and he wouldn't break 1,000 yards receiving in a full season for the first time since 2002. He would only have 982 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns, but would also miss a game, making him just shy of the 1,000-yard mark. 2010 was arguably the worst year of his career, having only 554 yards and 2 touchdowns despite playing 14 games. But guess what? Steve isn't done just yet. Coming back at the following season, erupting for 1,394 yards and 7 touchdowns, also being elected to a Pro Bowl this season as well. Smith would only have 2 more seasons of over 1,000 receiving yards or more in a season. Once would be in 2012 and once again in 2014. He would sign a 3-year deal with the Ravens in 2014, but wouldn't ever really shine. In 2015, Smith was on pace for almost 1,600 receiving yards, but midway through the season, he had cracked 4 ribs and would later on tear his Achilles tendon. Smith would have an 800 receiving yards in his final NFL season, calling it quits after a long and wonderful 16-year NFL career. All in all, Smith would finish his career with 1,031 catches, which is 12th all-time, 14,731 yards, which is 8th all-time, and 81 touchdowns, which is tied for 30th of all time. None of this is even considering his return game early on in his career. While I wouldn't sit here and say Steve Smith is a top 10 receiver of all time, he doesn't get nearly enough love and recognition for what he did. It doesn't help that he played during the era where great receivers were taking over. Names such as Randy Moss, Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, all early on, and even later other greats like Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, and Calvin Johnson had taken over. Smith showed everyone that size doesn't matter, which it doesn't, by the way. It's hard over everything. He did a lot of trash talking too, which is fun to watch. I grew up with Smith as my favorite receiver and loved every portion of his game. So let me know, do you guys think that he's undervalued for what he brought to the table?